Today on the channel, we're going to be doing the Flaneur Pants sew along. So here they are. Whether this is your first pair of pants or like your 50th pair of pants, we are here to take you step by step through the sewing process and show you some fun tips and tricks along the way. And I'm so excited to make a new pair. I really love these pants. We did a whole intro video where we talked about the style and the model pictures, and you can reference that if you haven't watched it already. We also have a blog post where we break down all of the different, aspects of it, like going over yardage requirements, things like that. So today we're gonna sew the pants. I am sewing a pair for myself. I'm going to be making a size large, which is where my measurements are falling right now. I usually don't make adjustments to my sew along samples, but I'm making a special exception for myself because I'm actually about 21 weeks pregnant right now. So I'm not really wearing many pants these days, but I wanted to just make one small adjustment, which is to lower the front rise by 1 inch. And it's a little bit different. We have a fit page where we go over all of the kind of fit adjustments that are common, and we show how to adjust the rise up or down. I'm doing it a little differently for this because I actually don't want to adjust the back rise. I only want to adjust the front rise. So I'm just lowering the front rise by about 1 inch so that the pants can sit a little bit lower under my belly and I can hopefully wear them for a little bit longer. This is the fabric I'll be using. It's kind of like it's a twill fabric with these like dusty pink stripes in it. I think it's really nice and it's not too thick. I also have not been wanting to wear like super sturdy clothes. So I'm hoping these work out. I did already do the adjustment and I filmed it. And if it's something that you guys want to see, let me know in the comments and we can make another video for that. But otherwise the sewing steps stay exactly the same. My piece might just look a tiny bit different. And I think that's it for the intro. So let's get started with the sew along. So we're gonna get started with the prep steps. And the first step is to snip in at all notches. So there are these little marks here that are used as reference points or matching points. And all you gotta do is just take some scissors, snip in 1/4 inch at all notches. And most of the pattern pieces are gonna have them. So an important prep step is to stay stitch the waistline of our pants. We're gonna be working with these for a while before we add the waistband at the end, and we just don't want this to get warped, so we're going to add a row of stitching to protect it from growing too much, and we do that by just sewing 1/4 inch from the edge. So it doesn't look like much, but there's that. You'll repeat that on both pants A pieces. Okay, so we're looking here at our pants A piece, and I have it right side facing up under here. And we have several marks that we need to add just on the right side of the fabric. So making sure that you're looking at the right side of your fabric, you're going to mark these 2 spots. That's the back pocket placement. And then there's 2 spots right here. That is the side pocket placement. And those are being marked on this. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure my piece is really well lined up, and then I'll just fold the pattern piece back, and we're marking on the X. This marks the size. What I have here is a removable pen. It removes with heat, so just be careful if you use something like this. It's nice because you get a nice precise mark, but if you iron on top of it, you're going to lose your mark, so just keep that in mind. So I have my 2 little X's. Not sure how well those are showing up on the camera, but they're there. And then I'm going to carefully fold back to mark these as well. So you'll repeat that with both of your front A pieces. So on our fly guard E pieces, I'm marking these little circle marks on the right side of the fabric. I switched to chalk here, because I know that this piece is going to be pressed. So make sure our piece is lined up perfectly. And then here I have pieces F and G, the front waistbands, and we're just going to, on the right side of the fabric, mark the buttonhole and the button placement. So again, I'm just folding back. Now we're gonna make a couple marks on the wrong side of the fabric. We're looking at our pants A pattern piece right now, and we're going to mark this dart on the wrong side of the fabric. And as you can see, I've retraced my dart legs. They're pretty similar, but they're a little bit different. Just want to note that. In preparation for marking this dart, I'm just going to cut up one of the dart legs. So now I can fold this back along the other dart leg, and I have a clean little triangle that I can mark on my pattern piece. But then I can also hinge this back and tape it back in place if I want to cut another pair or something like that. Okay, so here I have my pants E piece, wrong side facing up underneath my pattern piece. And I've got a couple objects on here to hold this big piece in place. Because this pattern piece is so big, when I'm marking things and I want to make sure that everything stays like lined up really well while I'm marking, I'm just going to give it a little weight to make sure nothing shifts around. And I will just hinge back at that dart line. So this is what I'm going to be marking right here. So there is our dart mark. Another mark that we're going to make while we're here, on the front crotch curve, there is a circle matching mark that we are just going to mark. That also goes on the wrong side. So I'm just folding my piece back here. We've got our little X marks the spot right there. We're going to repeat these marks on both sides. Okay, so we're also going to be marking the wearer's left and the wearer's right on our pants A pieces. So this is, so I have this, you're looking at the right side of the fabric. I'm just wrapping it around myself so that I can see which side it's going to sit on, and this is the left. So I just have written right and left on some painters. And on the wrong side of the fabric, I'm just going to stick a little label that says left so that I know this is my wearer's left, and I'll put the right on the other one. This is also helpful for differentiating the right side of the fabric and the wrong side of the fabric if you have fabric that looks really similar on both sides. So I might just put a little chunk of tape on the wrong side of each of my pattern pieces. So we've got a little bit of interfacing to add. You're going to cut a couple little rectangles of interfacing, and then right here I've got my front right waistband and my front left waistband, and I have my pattern pieces lined up on top of where I marked them. So these are right side facing up. There's my button mark, and then here is my button. I am going to fuse these little scraps of interfacing onto the wrong side of the fabric, so they're going behind the buttonhole / button markings. So I'm just going to flip this, and you can see I've got a little piece of tape here to designate that this is the wrong side of the fabric. And then just glue side down, just stick that like that. I like to keep my pieces with their pattern piece. And then again, here's my right side because I have my little mark there. So the interfacing goes behind. Next up, we're adding interfacing to our fly facing D piece. And so again, mine looks a little different because I lowered the front rise, but basically you want to make sure when you cut this out that you've got your right side of your fabric facing up and the right side of your pattern piece facing up. And then when you cut out your interfacing, you have the glue side, which would be technically the wrong side of your interface facing up, and the pattern piece facing up. So that will just make sure that everything will fuse together nicely. I've definitely accidentally cut this the wrong way, and luckily it's a small piece, so if you need to recut it, you can. So we're just fusing interfacing to the wrong side of our fly facing D piece. And then we held off on doing this mark when we were marking everything before because it actually goes on the wrong side, which will be covered in interfacing. So we can do that now. The last step of the prep is going to be to cut the elastic down to size, and we've got suggested lengths in the instructions, but you can also wait to do that until step 30 or 31, which is when we're assembling the waistband. We're just going to hold off and do it then. Our first sewing step is actually finishing. So we're going to finish our back and front crotch curves on our pants A pieces, so both of them. And I'm going to use a serger for this. You could use a zigzag stitch, you can use the overlock stitch on your sewing machine, however you like to finish your seams. Here I have the crotch curves serged. Next, we've got our fly facing, and we're just going to finish this outer curved edge in the same way that you finished your crotch curves. And here's that finished. Okay, so now we have our fly guard E, and I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together. I put this little piece of tape here to designate the wrong side, but I'm going to actually take it off now because we're going to sew this. So I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together. I'm just going to sew this little bottom seam. So just 3/8 of an inch from the edge along that little. So now I'm going to flip this right side out. And I just pinch this corner down and push it through neatly. And that should give you a nice crisp edge. And then we'll just give this a little press. Matching up those straight edges. Okay, so now we're going to finish this raw edge. Just finish the two edges together. And here is our fly guard finished. So here we're looking at the wrong side of pants A, and you can see my dart mark right here. We are going to be sewing the dart in the next step. So what we want to do is match up our dart legs, and we'll just add some pins. When you sew a dart, you start at the top and you work, you start at the top and you work toward the point. So when I pin these, I want my pin going this way. I want my pin going this way, so that it's easier to remove. So now that you have your dart legs aligned, you can stitch these at your sewing machine. So I'll start here, I'll sew down the dart leg to the point, and then I'll show you my trick for making sure that your dart ends are finished. When you get close to the end, you want to try to catch just a couple threads for like 2 or 3 stitches. And then what I do is just sew off of it and let the machine run a few times, and it twists the threads up so that your dart won't open up. And I've done this method forever and it has never failed me. So you'll sew the darts on both sides, and then you press them towards the back of your pant, and then you add just a basting stitch at the top here that holds the dart in place going towards the back. Next up, we're prepping our pockets. So we have a back pocket and side pockets, and these instructions are the same for both pockets. So we'll show you on one, and just know you're going to repeat with all 4. So I'm going to set this aside. Here's my one pocket. I have my little mark to show the wrong side of fabric. First up, we're going to press the upper edge under 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just grabbing my ruler and getting cramped space. Now we are going to fold, you have these little notches on your side seams of your pockets. We're going to fold it back at those little notches. We're not going to press this. And we're just going to stitch 3/8 of an inch from the edge on either side. Okay, there we have that sewn. Now we are going to flip this right side out. So people like to clip these, but I like to leave the fabric to give it more body at that corner where you're gonna have more, it's more of like a tension point. And if you flip this properly, you can get a really crisp edge without having to clip a corner. So what you do is just pinch it really well, trying to get in there perfectly and push it through so that the fabric stays like really neat on the inside. And if everything stays where it's supposed to be, you can gently just shove the corner out and it will go. You have to be careful if you're using scissors because you can stab right through. But then I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a poke and you get a pretty darn square corner. Now we're going to give this a press straight across. And this upper part of your pocket should be 1 inch. So if you're wanting to make sure that's lining up, you can kind of just, yep. You're gonna press that, and then you're gonna press each of these edges under 3/8 of an inch. If you have spots that you wanna make sure keep their press, a seam clapper, or honestly any sort of thing that you leave weighted on there while the fabric cools a little bit, will help the fabric hold its creases really well. So there's our pocket. You can give it a press from the right side as well if you want. Okay, so our next step is to top stitch along this folded edge right here. And we're just top stitching 1/8 of an inch from that fold. If you want to use top stitching thread, you're probably going to want to stitch this from the right side because you won't have top stitching thread in your bobbin. You'll only have it on top. So you can make a mark just right inside of 1 inch. So it'd be like, 7/8 of an inch. Okay, for my top stitching thread, I'm using Mara 70, and this color is one of the only colors I had that kind of worked. It's silver, and I think it'll look kind of cool on the taupey, pinky vibe with silver top stitching. Yeah, I wish I had like pink or something, but I think this will be cool, and it's what I've got. So I'm gonna load my machine up with this in the top thread, not the bobbin thread. But I will say, and this is controversial, Mara 70 is a really nice top stitching thread, and it's not as thick as some other ones, like this this Gutermann top stitching thread that you find a lot of times in your fabric store. This is really thick, and it's too thick to go in a bobbin. This I do sometimes put in a bobbin with 0 issue. So, okay, so I'm gonna lengthen my stitch to 3.5 millimeters because that is what I like my stitch length to be when I'm top stitching. And remember, I'm stitching 7/8 of an inch from the edge right here. So let's see where that falls. There's usually some sort of line on here that I can follow, and it looks like I can follow just this little ridge right here, and that's gonna be good. When I'm sewing a patch pocket, I like to leave a long thread because then I can just tuck it under when I top stitch this pocket down. And then I'll leave a decent length thread on this side so that I can tuck that under as well. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I have completed those steps with all 4 of my pockets, my 2 back pockets and my 2 side pockets. Now we're going to sew them to our pants. Here's my pants A piece sitting right side facing up, and here is the back area, and here's my pocket. I left these long threads and you'll see why. Okay, you can hear the steam from my iron, is annoying, but sorry. So I've got my marks here that we put on in the prep step, and I'm just aligning the corners of my pockets with those. And then I'm just gonna add some diagonal pins to hold it in place. And then when I just kind of tuck this thread under, and I'll continue pinning down my pocket. Okay, so now I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to edge stitch, going around the sides and lower parts of the pocket. And we'll definitely need to back stitch at the beginning and the end of our stitch. You stitch 1/8 of an inch from this folded edge. I like to just get as close as possible, so if getting closer than 1/8 of an inch is possible for you, then do that. You should still have your top stitching thread, and if you're using top stitching thread, you should still have it in your machine from this last stitch. And so you'll want, if you were using it, you want to have top stitching thread in. And I keep my stitch length at 3.5 millimeters. Okay, so I'm at my machine. I've got my top stitching length, and then what I like to do is set my, when I'm doing top stitching, I want to get close to the edge, I'll set my project up underneath so that it's aligned with something that's easy to follow, like the edge of this opening. And then I move my needle position over. So I'm just going to that's probably good. That'll be kind of different on your sewing machine based on like how wide your presser foot is and stuff like that, but that's what I like to do. We've got our pants A pieces right sides together, and this is our front crotch curve, and there's a little notch right here. It's hard to see with the serged edge, but I can see it in person that it is right there. So we're going to sew from notch to crotch. That's funny, I didn't realize that before. We'll use our 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you were using top stitching thread before, you're going to want to switch back to your regular thread. So 3/8 of an inch from here to here. And you want to back stitch at the beginning of your stitch. And now we're going to press this seam open. Okay, so here we are looking at the pants with our two pants right sides together. This top piece is the wearer's left. I've got my little label right here. And then we're just going to flip it open. So remembering this is the wearer's left, this is the wearer's right. We have our fly facing right here, and we're pinning it right sides together with our wearer's left. And we are matching. So here is our little circle mark right here. I think it's kind of hard to see, but that's right there. And then here is our circle mark on our fly facing. So those need to align. I'm going to stab through this and then find the circle mark so that I know those are perfectly matched up. And I'm just pinning through the wearer's left right now. I'm not, this is, the wearer's right is off to the side. And then we're just going to pin this in place, matching up this edge. Great. And then we're going to stitch from circle mark to top, 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Here's that stitched, and I was sure to back stitch at the beginning of my stitch. Now we're going to press this, the fly facing out towards the center front, and we'll press the seam going that way as well, so it's going to be like that. So here's that pressed, and again our wearer's right is still completely loose and not sewn to the fly facing at all. Okay, so now that we have that pressed, we're going to sew our zipper in the next step. So here's my zipper, and as you can see, it is longer than it needs to be, which is totally fine and actually preferable. We'll shorten it later, and that's really easy, but it's nice to make sure that you have plenty of length. Again, my zipper might look extra longer than your zipper because I did shorten my rise a little bit. So the zipper goes right sides together, facing down. That's important. So not facing up on your fly facing, facing down on your fly facing. The tape aligns with this folded edge right here. The bottom of your zipper tape is going to align with the bottom of your fly facing. Don't bring it down here, because then when you go to sew your top stitching for your fly, you're going to be hitting your zipper and that stinks. So the bottom of your zipper is aligned with the bottom of your fly facing, and your zipper is lined up with this. Our first stitch is going to be along this outer edge of the zipper tape. So it will be along right here. I am going to, you can pin your zipper in place if you want. You could hand baste it, which is actually a nice technique for holding it in place in a nice way. If you have Wonder Tape's like a two-sided tape that is great for holding zippers in place. And I'm just going to use Wonder Tape to hold it in place. I think it's easiest if you have it on hand. So just going to stick it onto my zipper. Sometimes it takes a little bit of pressing. Film and then expose the other sticky side of your zipper, or of your Wonder Tape. Pull that off. So now, again, I'm aligning this, the bottom, aligned with the bottom, the tape aligned with the seam, and then I'll just give this a good press to hold it in place. And that's going to be enough to hold it in place as we sew our zipper. Cool, so now our first stitch is going to be 1/4 inch from the zipper coil. So just close to the zipper coil on this outer edge, we're going to sew 1/4 inch going all the way. So I'm going to put my zipper foot onto my sewing machine and I'll show you how we sew that. So here I have my zipper foot loaded onto my presser foot, and I'm just moving my project under. So I want to be about 1/4 inch from the zipper teeth, so I'm getting in close, but I'm not trying to be too close, if you know what I mean. And then we'll just sew a straight stitch down. Careful when you get to places like this with the end of your zipper. You just want to make sure that your needle is going to miss it. So walk your needle if necessary, but we're clearing it. Stitch down to the bottom and do a little back stitch. And there you have it. So our next stitch is going to just be another row of parallel stitches to that last one, just close to the edge of the zipper to hold that in place. So I've got my 2 rows of stitches along my zipper, and they're kind of hard to see because of how well I matched the thread. The next step will be sewing this loose end of our zipper to the wearer's right. So I'm flipping my wearer's right. This is finally coming into play. So what we're going to do is match up these loose ends, the raw edge of our wearer's right and our zipper tape. So we'll just scooch those over to match them up. And I'm just catching my wearer's right with this. You could use Wonder Tape here as well if you wanted, but it's pretty easy to get it aligned without worrying too much about it moving around. So now I'm going to take this to my machine and sew 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so that seam is sewn, and this is the wearer's right. And now we've got, here's what it looks like on the other side. Now you can kind of see how this fly is coming together. Obviously we've got a little bit more to do, but it's exciting. The next step involves our fly guard. Okay, here she is. And what we're going to do, you can fold that under and out of the way, or we'll fold this over. So we're looking at it from this side. And the fly guard goes just on top of the zipper tape, and it matches up with the wearer's right. So now this wearer's right will have the zipper sandwiched in between the wearer's right and the fly guard. And then we also have the circle mark down here that matches up with our circle mark right here. So I'm gonna take a pin to match those up. Not dealing with our wearers left at all in this step. So just make sure that all of that is out of the way. There we go. Those are matched up. So we're going to be sewing 1/4 inch from the edge, starting up here, coming down to our circle mark and back stitching. And that'll be inside the seam allowance of that last stitch we just did. So make sure you use 1/4 inch. Make sure all of this stuff is out of the way when you're sewing. You don't want to catch any of that. And okay, so I've given my fly a good press. You can see here's the fly guard, and then there's the fly, and it's kind of like a little accordion situation here with this is the fly facing, and then it all kind of wraps around to come together nicely along the front. So just a couple more steps with the fly and then we're done. You have a fly top stitching guide piece in your that was included in your pattern that you don't cut this piece from fabric because it's a guide for drawing on your top stitching. So what we're going to do is lay it over our piece, and we're going to trace along this outer edge. Weight down my fabric so it stops folding up like that. So we're going to trace around this piece, and then there's these 2 little marks right here that say bar tacks between these marks. So you can just make a little mark as well right there to let you know where you're going to do that. So yeah, you can weigh this piece down. I've got my heat removable pen here, so I'm just going to carefully trace this guide, our guide for top stitching our fly. Now, during this step, I'm going to I'm pinching away here my fly facing along with my pants and my zipper, but I don't want this fly guard to be stitched in this top stitching. So kind of pinning these together and pushing this out of the way, and you can actually add a pin to push that out of the way as long as it doesn't rumple up your fabric and make things weird. So more pins. You don't need to do a ton of pinning here. It's just to make sure that things stay orderly when you do your top stitching. And we're going to be stitching kind of along here, but we'll do it from the face of the fabric. So I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to take off my zipper foot and put my regular presser foot back on, and then I'm also going to switch to my top stitching thread. Okay, so I've got my machine set back up. I've got my top stitching thread in. I've lengthened my stitch length to 3.5 millimeters again for my top stitching stitch length. And I'm just bringing my project under my thing, and I'm going to just follow the line that I made for myself. So this can be a little bit intimidating because it is on the center front of your project, but just take your time. You might be dealing with some bulk from your zipper, so if you need to like walk your foot at all, do that, but you also just kind of have to go for it with this top stitching. We're approaching the curve, and I think keeping a steady pace is good, but not going too fast. And if your curve ends up a little bit off of your mark, it's okay. Having a smooth curve is more important. But yeah, sometimes it's just not perfect, and that's okay. Practice is something that helps, and accepting your top stitching for what it is. Making sure that there's nothing causing tension that is going to cause your sewing machine to take shorter steps will also help, because that's when you can notice that, like, when the stitches, you know, get like a little bit stalled and they're a little bit shorter coming around a curve, that's when you can see it. So if there's something that's like inhibiting free movement, then try to eliminate it. So here's that done, and I'm just going to remove the pin that's holding back our fly guard so that it can now sit behind our fly again. And then now we're going to do this little bar tack that holds the fly guard in place just down here. So if you want to add a little pin, you can, but just make sure that you're bar tacking between these spots and you're just making sure that your guard is getting caught underneath. And here's our little bar tack, and our fly is complete. Okay, so here's our fly, here's our pants legs, and now we're going to sew the back crotch. So we'll just bring these right sides together along the back crotch curve. You've got a set of double notches back here that match up, and you'll just pin this together and sew 3/8 of an inch from the edge going all the way around. So here's that sewn, and I forgot to mention, switch back to your regular thread if you're using top stitching thread for that last step. And then after you sew this, you'll press it either open or you can press it to one side. Dealer's choice. Okay, so now we're going to sew the inseams on our pants. And what we can do is start at the crotch, matching up our front and back crotch. And then work our way down each leg. Okay, so now we're going to sew our inseams all in one go. We'll sew 3/8 of an inch from the edge going all the way up, around the crotch, back down the other leg. So here I have that sewn, and now I need to finish this inseam, and then we're going to press it towards the back leg. Okay, so here that seam is finished and it is pressed towards the back. Now we'll set these aside, work on the waistband. Okay, so here are my 3 waistband pieces. I've got my back, my left, and my right. And a couple of things to note. You've got notches on these short ends, and then you also have a notch on 1/2 of your back waistband, and then there's notches down here. And so we want to make sure that all of the notches end up on one side, because that's going to help us when we're assembling this. So what I mean by that, so this is the right side of my waistband. I've got my wrong side marked, and then this goes, they're going to be pinned together first along their short edges matching these little notches. And so there's my left, and I'm going to pin that right sides together, and then I can see that my notch along my waistband is right here on the same end as that notch. So that's just going to make sure our markings stay where they need to be, and they don't end up where we marked our button/buttonhole. That doesn't end up being on the inside of our waistband. So then I'm just matching that. So I'm going to sew both of these short ends using the 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then I will press the seam open. So I have those short ends sewn together and this seam pressed open. Our next step is going to be to fold this in half lengthwise and press it with wrong sides together. Before I do that, I'm just going to remove these little bits of tape, because now I'll know which side is the wrong side. And I don't want to press that tape. So I'm just folding this in half, wrong sides together, and pressing it. So now I can unfold that. I've got a nice crease that I will be able to follow later. And now I'm going to find the unnotched edge. So this has a notch here. This is not notched. And I'm going to press the unnotched edge under 3/8 of an inch. When you do this, just don't press out your crease here. Great. So now we're going to sew the short ends of our waistband, and what we'll do is just fold back at our crease. We're not going to press, but we'll just fold back at the crease, and we're going to preserve our pre-pressed edge. Keep that folded. There we go. And then we'll just sew 3/8 of an inch from the edge going up, and we'll repeat it on both sides. Here's that sewn, and I'm just going to pinch this corner really well and push it through to the other side, and you can kind of give it a wiggle and maybe a poke if you want, to get that crisp edge. Again, I don't clip that corner because I want it to keep its structural integrity. This is like an important point of your pants, so I just don't want to clip that fabric away if I don't have to. And then, yeah, that looks pretty good, and we'll do that on both sides. Okay, so here are my pants, and I'm ready to attach my waistband. So first things first, unzip your zipper. Very exciting. These get sewn right sides together, so starting here, and this, your front left waistband is the one with the buttonhole marking on it, and that matches up with this, your wearer's left pant leg, but also the one that is on top. Match up these raw edges, making sure that folded edge stays under. I like to cheat out the waistband like a millimeter past the center front, just a tiny, the tiniest bit, but err on the side of cheating it over this edge a little bit. It'll just help it end up a little neater. And then the side seam of your waistband is going to match up with this dart seam. The notch at center back on your waistband is going to match up with your center back. And we're just pinning through one layer of waistband in this. Right sides together again. Matching up that dart seam on this other side. And then bringing it around. This matches up with the end of your fly guard. So you can cheat it out just like just a hair. And make sure, like here where your zipper could kind of flop around a little bit, pull it flat. And I'm just gonna add pins in between going around the waistband just to keep everything in order. Make sure everything is laying flat. Okay, so I have that all pinned, and I'm going to stitch around my waistband 3/8 of an inch from the edge. A couple things to note: when you get close to your zipper, you might want to walk your foot just in case you might land right on the zipper and break your needle, which you don't want. So just walk it right over that part and walk it over when you get here too. Oh, look how my zipper tape wants to fold. Make sure that doesn't happen. And then, yeah, we'll sew that using our 3/8 inch seam allowance. Cool, so that seam is sewn now, and you can shorten your zipper. I can just cut in between the plastic teeth on here. If you were using like a heavy duty metal like jeans zipper, you might want to use some pliers to remove a couple teeth before cutting, but I find that pretty easy. And then our next step, we're going to press our waistband up and away from our pants. We're gonna keep preserving this pre-pressed seam. Okay, so I've pressed my waistband up and away from my pants. Now we're just going to sew this folded edge of the back waistband. We're not going to be working on the front just yet. So starting at this dart seam, I want to match my folded edge up with just right overlapping seam from the last step. And then I'm actually going to put a pin on the right side because I'm going to be stitching in the ditch in this next step, and that is done from the right side of the fabric. So I've just overlapped that, and then I'm going to work my way down. Just kind of just overlapping that folded edge so that it can get caught when we sew just right in the ditch. Starting at one side seam and stitching to the other, I'm just going to stitch my back waistband. We're stitching just right in this ditch so that it kind of gets hidden by the seam. Okay, so my back waistband is sewn, and I have my elastic, my suggested elastic length from that was listed in the prep steps of the instructions. I went and cut mine a couple inches long because of my current situation. I just want to feel it out and see if I might want the elastic to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to attach a safety pin to one end of the elastic, and then I will just feed it through. As the end of your elastic gets close on this side to the seam, we don't want to pull it all the way in, so just be cautious of pulling carefully. Get it in there, and then once it gets really close, you can kind of pin it in place if you want. So yeah, that's getting kind of close. So I'm just going to stick a vertical pin right there to hold that end so it doesn't pull through, and then I can kind of pull this side. I have the pants on, and I think that, and I have a pin where the button would be, just so that I can kind of get a vibe. And I think I like the way they're fitting. I have a good amount of room to grow, and I think as my belly gets bigger, I can kind of let them sit a little bit lower because I've given myself a little bit of extra room. But yeah, I'm liking the way they are. I mean, again, I'm not really opting for pants very often right now, but I think if I was, they're like kind of, I would say these are like beachy trousers. So now that I know that I like the elastic length, I'm going to add vertical stitches along the side seams, just catching the elastic in them so that that is secured into place. If you feel worried that your elastic is going to move around, you can also anchor it at the center. So I've got my side seams anchored, and then now I'm going to pin my front waistband in place, and I will do this in kind of the same way I did the back waistband, where I'm pinning it so that we can stitch in the ditch. One thing you want to make sure is that these center front seams were sewn at the exact, sometimes when you get close to this edge, you lose like your exact 3/8 inch seam allowance, and that is going to be obvious once you zip your zipper up if they are not even, if these seams don't line up when the zipper is zipped. So I would just like zip your zipper and look at it, and if it looks off, you can, you know, make sure you can let this seam out and fix it, or let this one out and fix it. But that's just a common thing I see to look out for. So just like we did with the back, I'm just going to pin this waistband in place. You can fold your seam allowance up into here. I like to tuck it around, and then yeah, just cheat the folded edge just over the seam. Now I'm going to stitch this in the ditch, and we'll repeat that on both sides. Here's that waistband sewn up. Okay, so for this next step, we're sewing the buttonhole and the button onto our waistband. And I have these jeans denim buttons that I like, and it's silver, so it kind of matches the top stitching thread. So you're going to follow your sewing machine's instructions for sewing these buttons. I recommend doing a test buttonhole always to just make sure that your machine is cooperating and that, you know, there aren't any little kinks to work out. You're going to want to switch to your top stitching thread if you've been using it for the buttonhole, and yeah, good luck. I'll see you after I sew this buttonhole. Okay, so my buttonhole turned out pretty good, and I just like to add fray check to the back of buttonholes, especially a waistband buttonhole, which I would say is a pretty high stress spot, that it's going to get a lot of, it's going to have pull, and this is just going to give it a little bit more durability, and I think it's good to reinforce it a little bit. I'll let this dry, I'll cut it open, and then I'm going to apply my button. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add my button, and this is obviously different than if you were just hand sewing a button on. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I still have my little button mark. These denim buttons come with like they have a screw base that goes underneath, and then you hammer them on. So I'll show you part of the process. I have a leather punch, which I think makes it easier. I just punch on the smallest hole. That makes it easier for this little screw to push through. You wouldn't want to make too big of a hole, but that just makes that easy. And then this kind of pops on my kit. You can do this. And then you just put this like this and you hammer it. I'm not going to do it on this table because it's better to do on like a really hard surface, like I do it on the floor. So anyway, just wanted to show you. So here's that button installed, and then there's that. And we've got a beautiful fly. So now all we have left is to hem the pants. Very exciting. Our first step with that is to press the hem edge under 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so there's 3/8 of an inch pressed under, and then we'll press it under another 1 inch. You're going to take this to your machine and you'll edge stitch just going all the way around, and you'll repeat on both pant legs. Here are the finished pants, and I just love how they turned out. They're a good casual pant for me for this time, and I have a little bit of room to grow, but I think I'll actually still be able to wear them after I have the baby as well. So I'm really excited about how they turned out, my beachy trousers. I hope that this sew along was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and we will see you next time. Have a great day. Happy sewing.